This is the American Lock 1100. This is going to be a guide to help you pick this lock for the first time. In order to do this, we are going to progressively pin this lock, which means we're going to disassemble it first. I'm going to try and be detailed as possible. Looking down the shackle hole, you can see a screw that we will need a Phillips screwdriver for. This is primarily what holds this padlock together. Once we remove this screw, you'll see the screw attaches to a little lug at the bottom. That will fall out, as well as the drill protection. And you are left with a key and knob cylinder, which is basically the American Lock 1100. The padlock itself is just a housing for this locking mechanism. I am going to show the disassembly of this lock as if you didn't have a lot of tools. This lock can be disassembled using a AAA battery, which is the method that I'm going to show. First thing is this C-clip right here on the back. We're going to use a pair of pliers and just push that clip forward. Once that clip is partially off, you can use any kind of tool to just pry that clip the rest of the way off. After removing that clip, I'm going to turn the key counterclockwise so that the lip that protrudes out the back will be in line with the Bible. This is going to prevent any of those driver pins from coming out of the Bible as we remove the core. Making sure to keep the key pins upright, we will push the battery through, and we're going to leave the battery inside and just work on removing the key pins. And there we are. So these are the key pins. As you can see, there are 6 spaces. Typically an American 1100 only has 5 of these pins filled. You can cover 4 of them up with your fingers and try to tilt them out one by one. But I find that it works a lot quicker by using one of your picks. In this instance, I am pressing out key pin 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And there we are. This is a close-up of those key pins. As you can see, the key pins for the 1100 are serrated if they are long enough. Now we're going to work on removing the driver pins. In order to accomplish this, we are going to press the battery backwards with our tweezers while keeping just above the driver pin so that the driver pin does not pop out under tension. Here you can see the springs will also come out. You can wait until the end, or you can individually remove those springs, and we'll continue that process until we've removed all 5 of these driver pins. Here's driver pin 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. To remove all the springs, you can just tilt the Bible upright, and all 5 of the springs will fall out. Here is a close-up of all of the pins and springs. In this instance, I have the driver pins above and the key pins in the middle and the springs below. It really doesn't matter how you orient this, just as long as you know where everything is. In order to progressively pin this lock, we are going to return the amount of springs that we need for pins that we will return. In this instance, I'm going to pin 3 chambers. So I have placed 3 springs into the Bible, replace the battery, and do the opposite of what we did before. We're going to put the pin into the chamber, press it down, and use the battery to cover it up. In this instance, we'll be working from rear to front. So chamber 3, and then chamber 2, and now chamber 1. Once we have the 3 front chambers pinned as we'd like, we're going to go to the core, and we're going to replace key pin 1, key pin 2, and key pin 3. And before we put this lock back together, we're going to make sure that we have everything in position. We're going to make sure that our key pins are flat against the top of the core with the key inside of the core. Now we're going to use the core itself to push the battery back out, remembering to keep that lip upright against the Bible. Now we can twist, and the lock will stay in place while we return the clip to the rear. And now we're going to reassemble the lock. This notch on the upper right side is where the Bible rests. Then we're going to look for the notch by the bottom of the keyway, and this is what keeps our drill protection in place. If the Bible moves towards the middle like this, just push it back over so that it's out of the way. Then we're going to stick the bottom post back inside of this hole, which will keep the Bible off to the side. And we're going to look down the hole to make sure that we are properly aligned before trying to put this screw back into place. Once the screw freely turns inside of the hole, we will tighten the bottom and top of the lock together, and we are done. In order to progressively pin this lock, you can just repeat this process with pins 1 through 5 until you're ready. Now let's talk about those pins that you're going to encounter with the 1100. The first is going to be the serrated spool. This is going to give you quite a few clicks as you move it into position, just depending on where it is found in the lock and how far you need to move it. The second type of security pin you're going to run into is the standard serrated pin. This is going to give a lot of clicks as it's being set past the shear line. And in some instances, you won't have to lift this pin at all if you have a high key pin. And speaking of those key pins, you can see the larger key pins will be serrated. This can cause you many issues. If you overset these pins, they do not seem to fall back as easily as other locks, as well as you will often hear clicks which may make you think that you're still setting a serrated pin past the shear line, and you may tend to overset these pins a lot easier than other locks that you've encountered up to this point. In order to combat that, what you're going to do is set these pins a lot slower than you're used to setting maybe some lower ranked locks such as an orange or a yellow lock, and try to feel for a distinct difference between the subtle clicks of moving a serrated pin through the shear line versus the heavier click with a more definitive feel as the full pin moves past the shear line. With a little bit of practice, you should be able to feel a good amount of difference between the two sensations as you pick this lock more and more.